13th reincarnation of a long line of holy monks who had ruled Tibet for centuries. Their religion was founded in ancient India by a spiritual teacher known as Buddha. For these true believers, the Dalai Lama is the human manifestation of one of the most popular Buddhist deities, the Buddha of compassion. So the Dalai Lama's devoted flock have come bearing good wishes and precious gifts.
Butter lamps, carpets, scriptures, brocades, all their precious belongings. And they get just a little glimpse of the Dalai Lama.
Much of what's offered here is then given away to charity, a gesture that helps bind the Dalai Lama to his scattered people.
These thousands of monks have gathered here for what's called a long life ceremony for the Dalai Lama. He is, after all, the embodiment of Tibet's spiritual and political aspirations. Today we have seen people who have really revered you. Their faces, people are crying. Are you the reincarnation of the Buddha of compassion?
If you ask me whether I'm reincarnation or say some higher being, like some Buddha or like that, then I will say no.
Can you explain what you are?
I'm firstly human being.
Yep.
There's no doubt, 100% sure. Then, second, I'm simple Buddhist monk.
He's not so simple, of course. Like the 13 Dalai Lamas before him, he's been at the center of the struggle for control of Tibet. For hundreds of years, the Dalai Lamas have wielded spiritual and sometimes political power, as long as they acknowledged Imperial China as their ultimate master. The collapse of China's last dynasty disrupted that pattern, and for almost 40 years, Tibet ruled itself. But in 1950, shortly after Chinese communist forces triumphed, they invaded Tibet to reassert their ancient claim. For 9 years, the Dalai Lama lived under communist rule until the people rebelled and he fled on horseback to India, across the Himalayas.
Around 10 p.m., I left, disguised as a soldier, one rifle, and then, in the next few hours, very dangerous.
The Dalai Lama escaped, but Tibet's Buddhist culture did not. During Chairman Mao's infamous Cultural Revolution, Red Guards smashed temples and traditions all across China. Tibetans say 6,000 of their monasteries were obliterated. Only 13 were left standing. When China opened up to the world in the 1980s, it did allow Tibet to rebuild its monasteries, but it kept them under strict communist control. Here in Dharamsala, we watched the Dalai Lama tell his side of the story to his visitors, including these high school students from the United States.
Everything controlled by Han Chinese, who have no idea about Tibetan culture, about Tibetan Buddhism. In fact, they consider Tibetan Buddhism is the dangerous thing.
I heard you say to the people, you said, we're dying. What did you mean by that?
Since Chinese army entered Tibet, a lot of damage, a lot of destruction. Plus, the population, Tibetan population, now becoming minority. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, some kind of cultural genocide is taking place.
Cultural genocide?
That's right. Present situation is a Tibetan nation actually facing death. In the name of liberation, like that.
His laughter seems puzzling until you understand that the Buddhist way is to find humor in all human folly.
Usually I describe Buddhist culture or compassionate culture, culture of peace, is really worthwhile to preserve.
For nearly 50 years of exile, the Dalai Lama has fought to preserve that culture. But he stopped short of demanding Tibet's outright independence. Instead, he's asked only that Tibetans be allowed to rule themselves while staying part of China.
Our approach, firstly, very strictly non-violent approach. Secondly, not seeking separation, but genuine autonomy.
But even that's too much for the Chinese government, which has vilified the Dalai Lama and cracked down on rebellious monks for the last 2 decades. Monks have been forced to swear allegiance to China and denounce the Dalai Lama. And many, like Nawang Dispel, refused. He spent 7 years in prison before escaping here to Dharamsala.
We shouted, "Independence for Tibet, Chinese go home. Long live the Dalai Lama."
What did they do?
On the way to prison, they beat me on the head and I began bleeding so badly. My shoes filled up with blood.
The Chinese government refused our repeated requests for an interview or to let us see what's happening in Tibet.
Why is it that the Buddhist monks in Tibet take such a risk and pay such a heavy price for being basically politically active?
Because we can't practice our religion, they force us to denounce our spiritual guide, the Dalai Lama. Our monasteries are surrounded by the Chinese army, and inside there are spies and officials who make us attend political meetings. If the young monks don't protest soon, there'll be nothing left.
And protest is exactly what many young Tibetan monks are doing. When we return, the Dalai Lama confronts his unruly flock.